Oh, hello. Welcome to today's Decay, where we celebrate births and beginnings of everything important since the dawn of time. Today is February 27th, and today, as every day, we're determined to shape the world into our own likeness, because that's why we're here, right? Yeah, I'd say so. So, in this day, 1958, this magazine, Famous Monsters of Filmland, premiered. 1958. This is actually number seven. It's not number one. Number one is hard to come by. Number seven, also not particularly easy, but nowhere near as hard as number one. Um, Published by Jim Warren, edited by Forrest J. Ackerman. This magazine brought Halloween to newsstands for kids of all ages every month from 1958 until the late 70s. Maybe, I guess you could say later, because eventually for Ackerman, I almost fell over. Once Foray Ackerman left, it continued for a long story short. Here's how this worked. 1958, Famous Monsters magazine premiered, but the start of this was really decades earlier. Forrest J. Ackerman was the brainchild of this magazine, and it featured tons of stills from films that were otherwise impossible for kids to find, for anybody to find. This was not available. There was no video stores. There was no YouTube. There was no way to see this, see the films, see stills, you name it. And he was just amassing this collection of film stills and going to see as many movies as he could, starting back in the 20s with One Glorious Day with Eck the Ghoul and Will Rogers. So that's like mid 20s, and afterwards wound up amassing this huge collection of stills and personal recollections of what he was able to see. And this stuff wasn't being shown. The art houses in the repertory theaters weren't really happening yet. That doesn't really happen until the mid to truly late 60s. The shock theater package, where some horror movies would wind up on television, happens like shortly after here, but around this time. But nobody was able to see this stuff yet. So it was really like Forey Ackerman's personal remembrances of, The Cat and the Canary, Phantom of the Opera, Dracula, you name it, all of it. It's all in there. It was all in his head, and it was all like his world that he created. He was a... how to say this succinctly. There was an early occult world on the West Coast that was like a pre-Anton LaVey Church of Satan mindset, involving Curtis Harrington, Jack Parsons, Cameron the Witch, Jack Parsons' wife, Forey Ackerman, Anton LaVey would have been involved in these circles, Kenneth Anger. And the whole thought here was that you could just shape your world as you see fit, right? Like, we don't need to adhere to whatever the mainstream pop values and definitions are. If my world centers around Lon Chaney Sr., I'm gonna make sure that's the case. And I think you could say that a lot with like subculture stuff later on, like in more recent decades. Uh, I don't see why people would necessarily be into pop culture stuff if this isn't okay. It's what's like forced down our throats, but you don't have to tune in. I haven't listened to the radio in longer than I can recall. I just listen to whatever I want, and that's the same idea, right? So the early occult world was very the pre Anton LaVey occult world on the West Coast was very much in this mindset of whatever it is I think's important, which is what we're doing here today and every other day on these videos, is shaping the world as we see fit, because it's all we've got, right? So Forey Ackerman, in an odd way, connected with all these kids to say, here's all sorts of exciting stuff. This is like, all sorts of great movies in here that sound terrific, whether you're able to see them or not. but you're able to project on what they could be, and by the way, learn and read and explore and use your imagination and create anything you can, be it making monster masks, be it writing stories, be it being a filmmaker. And this was the inspiration for countless kids in the 50s, 60s, and 70s to like pick up film cameras and just in general be like hands-on and shape their world as they wanted to, whatever it was they were dreaming up, and not to let go of it. So was this supposed to be this like occult satanic idea? I would say in his own way, yes, but not in what eventually it becomes with the Anton LaVey Church of Satan, and the way all this evolved over time, where it's like the satanic panic of the 80s. No, that's just the point. It was whatever he felt like it should be, and his house was filled with all sorts of monster and classic Hollywood ephemera, original film posters, paintings, props, and like he was shaping his world accordingly, and was giving guided free tours every Saturday for 50 plus years in his house, and telling the same stories over and over again, which then become like almost like not Bible verses, but pretty much, right? If you can quote like specific sayings and stories that you're going to attribute to, you know, having the original cape of Bela Lugosi from Dracula here in your house, and you have a story about what it's all about, and then people can like recite it back to you, like this becomes its own religion in its own way. Yeah, so that's what this magazine was all about, or I would say. You wouldn't have the whole second half of the 20th century's science fiction and horror creations without it. You know, like all the big ones, and well on down to everybody else. Like there was no way to see these movies yet, and it was this magazine that made people, that sold the idea of I want to find these films, whether they're good or not. So right, I mean, you wouldn't even have like Star Wars, Steven Spielberg stuff, like Stephen King, like all these people are influenced, shaped, arguably solely by Forey Ackerman and Famous Monsters magazine. Yeah. So here you go. That's my short version, right? Maybe. I don't know. What else? 1962. P.T. Bonham, born today. Drummer extraordinaire of Forbidden Dimension. We were very lucky to have Forbidden Dimension booked for for 2 different Midnight Monster Hops, and we went on a New England Haunted road trip where we got to hang out with the band, and like stop off along the way at various Haunted New England attractions, roadside Americana type places, and they played a couple shows along the way, so it was a whole like half week of monster rock and roll nonsense, which we should just expand to the whole lifetime, right? Not a half week, not once a month at newsstands, but you know, monster rock and roll nonsense for life, because that's what we do. We shape our reality as best we can. Until tomorrow, goodbye.